All right. Good morning, everyone. So, in case we have anyone new here today, I'm going to introduce myself again. My name is Debbie Martin. I am the National Associate Director. And what that means is where you work with your ADs over a given area. Right now, I'm really working with NAS on the survey side to try and figure out what this all means in our new structure. I know we've had some setbacks. It's not perfect yet. Hopefully, we're seeing improvements continually as we're going on. So, thank you. I'll start with thank you for your patience and understanding while we've been going through all of this. But like I said, we are all learning something new every day and every month as we are going through this transition. All right. So, if you were here yesterday, I admitted that I had a lot of experience with ARMS 3. Before I started with NASDA, I was with NAS for 15 years. At least 10 of them I had spent on ARMS 3. So yesterday was a piece of cake for me. I have a confession and I am not as familiar with the CEAP survey. So I brought along Angela to assist me today. So Angela, would you be willing to unmute and share a little bit about yourself?
Hello, Angela Byers-Krantz. I am the CEAP administrator at the headquarters level. So I am in Washington, D.C., working in the survey administration branch. Before that, I worked in the Northeast region. And before that, I took a little bit of a break after NAS reorganized in 2013. I had before that been working in Wisconsin. So I have a lot of different experience, a lot of different survey work, did some NASDA trainings back in the day, and I'm here as a resource. So if Debbie can't answer your question, I'm here to help.
So definitely make sure you ask your questions so we can keep Angela on her toes today. Sure, she's nodding her head. Yes, see, she's willing to. All right. So still bringing in some people. That's all righty. I'm going to remind you if you were here yesterday, if I'm looking this direction, I'm trying to stay close to my screen because I was told when I turned my head, sometimes it was hard to hear. But you guys are all over there, so if you see me looking away, it's actually because I'm looking at you. So I just wanted to let you know that when I'm looking away from the screen, I'm actually having more eye contact at that time. There were already some remarks about half of the screen is blank. So here are just some Zoom reminders. Please keep your microphone muted to prevent any background noise. Be aware of your surrounding if you do have your camera on. If you have an issue, please contact your trainer or put it in the chat. Yesterday, there were some remarks about not seeing the entire presentation or my face covering part of the presentation. Right now, you should be seeing something that says reminder to attendees. If you are seeing other people or you're seeing me and you would like to close it, there should be like a little negative sign in the corner of that box. So once again, if you're on an iPad, you should be able to close me so you can truly just see the screen. Okay? But as I mentioned yesterday, if there is something that kind of gets missed along the way, these are being recorded and we will share that presentation with you. Honestly, my goal is to get these all out by shortly after our meeting today. So once again, if you miss something, show up late, leave early, we're going to get this presentation to you as soon as possible. All right, so for today, we're going to go through a lot of examples from all of the sections. We may not necessarily have it yesterday where you guys were filling them in. Some of it is just showing how the data should look. When we're done with all the sections, we're going to go through some data relationships and data collection procedures. So as a reminder, we're going to do the same thing we did yesterday. We're going to be breaking every hour. and we will not be taking a lunch. So if you get hungry or when you get hungry, go ahead, take your lunch. Just please make sure you turn your camera off if you are walking around or getting your food. One fun thing in the agenda, I'm a little nervous on time today, but if we do have time, I have a fun game for us at the end of our session today. All right, so let's go ahead and we are going to dive right into our SEAP for Section A. So Section A is really what's going to set the tone for the rest of the questionnaire. It's very important that acres reported in Section A are reflected in all of our follow-on sections. The first question in Section A is going to be capturing the characteristics of the field that we drew in Phase 1. We want to make sure we're including all cropland. We include all field borders, grassways, other conservation practices, idle cropland, and non-ag. And then 2 is literally just a sum of that field. So I'm starting us off right away with the question, can you have 0 planted acres in Section A? So can we have no planted acres? I'm seeing a few yeses already. Yes. So there can be a situation where no crop was planted. A majority of the time it was because it was idle cropland reported to qualify for Phase 2. Please remember back from your training, orchards, nursery, vineyards, and like do not qualify. In states where summer fallow is common, a field may be idle every other year or on rotations, such as the third or fourth year. There may also be some situations such as grain was planted, but then it was used for pasture rather than harvesting. So there could be multiple situations that don't fit the mold. Just make sure you collect the information as best you can and provide good notes throughout the form. All right, so we're going to start in with our first example. The cropped acres were 65 acres of corn. There is a riparian buffer between the field and the river of 10.5 acres. So the total item for 23 is 77.5 acres. The most important thing is that if it's included here, or that we include, or if it's include the entire conservation area that was included for Phase 1. Throughout the questionnaire, please watch for the enumerator action. So we have one right here at the very beginning of our survey. The enumerator actions are going to provide instructions for skipping or probing type questions. Make sure you always follow the instructions carefully and proceed with the full survey only if the selected field has been planted or cropped, or if a portion of the acres are planted, or, sorry, few more ors, or if the acres in the selected field are idle or a combination of the above. All right. So going back to this action item, planted acres, it makes sense on why NRCS is going to ask about our planted acres. But why do you think that we are going to still do this even if it is idle land? Can you guys put it in the chat why we would have it for idle land? Julia, if you are not seeing the entire PowerPoint, there should be a minus sign above the participants for you to be able to hide all of those participants. CRP, 3-year, study is for conservation. Still might use conservation practice. All right. So yes, there could be, if there could still be operations that happen to have idle cropland during the year, that could still spread manure, herbicide, or tillages happening on idle fields during the year. So yes, we are still going to include it even if it is idle. All right, that's all I'm really going to cover for section A. The most important takeaway is make sure the acreages are consistent from section A throughout the entire questionnaire. Include the conservation practices on the edge of the field as well as within the field, and the acres should sum the total. All right, that was a very quick one, but before we move on, do we have any questions for section A? All right, I'm not seeing or hearing anything, so we're going to keep moving forward. Section B. So, how about the shelter belt by the field? You know what? We are actually going to go over an example of that here in just a moment. So, if you hold off on that, we're going to go over that in section B. Sorry, I just said if you have a question, but I will be addressing that one here in a moment. So for section B, having a written conservation plan either through a federal agency with like NRCS or potentially a state or local agency will influence how the land is operated by the respondent. It may come in a form of a program such as CRP or EQIP. We saw multiple people respond to that in the chat. However, which will provide a payment or a cost sharing such as part of a contract associated with the field. It could also involve abiding by a local or state environment regulation. The important concept is that plan is written and it provides guidance necessary to implement any of the large number of different conservation practices act throughout the section. All right. Please note the enumerator instructions for how to proceed throughout it. Once again, those action notes, we want to make sure we are always following them throughout the questionnaire. No. All right. So before we move on in section B, Taylor, the question, what if the operator is no longer renting the land? So I'm assuming that we're saying in 2025, that operator or the person you're talking to operated the land. And now for 2026, they are not. Because the questionnaire is asking about 2025, we are going to complete it because he was the operator in 2025. All right, question 4. This is an in-depth dive of the variety of different conservation practices. I do not have all of them listed here, but it has a very long list in the questionnaire. Respondents should identify the conservation practices in place on the selected field and surrounding conservation areas. Look out for things that are along the field edges that could be considered a part of the conservation area for the selected field. Some elements could be more noticeable, such as terraces or filter strips, while some of them are more subtle, such as no-till or reduced tillage practices. Each, each practice will have a yes or no to be coded, and some of them may have follow-on questions. The important thing is, as I mentioned, some of them are not necessarily easily identified, so please make sure you are asking each question to the operator. All right, so this is where I was going to circle back to the example from section A. So let's go through what should be included versus not included. So the riparian area right here in the chat, should this be included? So right here where it's red, should we be including in this? I'm seeing some yeses. Yes, we recorded this in section A as part of the conservation area. This needs to be included while we're answering the conservation practices. Next, we have this grass waterway. Should this be included? Seeing no's. Okay. Whoop, clicking. I'm going to say maybe here. So this is dependent on if the practice is an adjacent field, if it is still part of the conservation area for the targeted field. If the respondent does not include it in the conservation area, then no, it should not be included. But if the grassed waterway is in an adjacent field and is used for runoff from the targeted field, then it is part of the conservation area and should be included. Oh, and some people even said that one, only if it drains into and considered part of the field. Yes. Sorry, I did not get through all the comments. Oh, I got too quick on my clicks there. What about the windbreak? Seeing a maybe. Ooh, could be. Probe, same as the waterway, if it's maintained, maybe. All right, if it's part of the field. We're getting it. Yes, the answer is also maybe. It was not originally included in Section A as part of the field in the conservation area. If the operator says it's not included, then no, you should not include it. But if going through this list, the operator says yes, we need to remind them in Section A, and we need to make those updates in Section A. So if right here he's telling us this windbreak is included, we want to go back to Section A and update our acres. That is a great time right there. We're going to be making comments as we are going throughout our questionnaire. I don't really like that it says quiz time, but we have a couple extra questions for you. So in the chat, where can you find additional information about each conservation practice asked in question 4? So this is going to have that long list of options of terraces or the buffers and all of that. Where can we find this information? The interviewer manual, that's a good one. Interviewer manual. All right, I keep seeing IM. Those are good. We also have a couple other options. The interviewer manual, a conservation plan, or I like that video slides. Yes, video slides. Or also you can go to the NRCS website and look at their resources. So there are a lot of opportunities for you guys to get a little bit more information about some of these conservation plans if you would like to look into them. What is a key requirement for a riparian buffer? So this may not be common in every single state. Some of them are required by state law. If you are in one of these areas, what is a key requirement? Anyone have this one? Conservation plan, filter water leaving field next to a stream, water. That was what I was looking for. A body of water such as a stream, lake, or pond. Like I said, some areas this is considered a practice. Other ones, there are some state regulations about buffers near waterways. All right, here just to summarize section B. If the respondent has a written plan, it will be helpful to have while you're going through these questions. Conservation practices may be presented or carried over from a previous operator that are not on a written plan but are still in place. So someone made a comment about if that wasn't the operator the entire time. It could go the other direction of we're following what a previous operator had done in some of our conservation practices. Some conservation practices are not noticeable on the photograph, so you cannot assume everything based on the photograph. Always ask your operator. And assistance with the conservation plan or practice implementation may have come from a combination of different resources. Excuse me. All right, do we have any? They always stay within the field. Yep, so some practices are always going to stay with that field. Do we have any questions going in or from section B? All right, those are some of our first kind of I hope, fairly straightforward. Next few sections, we're going to start diving into some fun tables to fill out. So going into section C, we're going to talk about cropping history. All right, to get a picture of cropping rotation and practices, the NRCS asks for 3 years of data. I know I've heard in the past that it was sometimes difficult to get those 3 years. Do the best that you can. Let's try and get as much information from the operator on those 3 years as possible. Okay, so we're going to go through a couple examples here. The first one is recording a nurse crop. So a nurse crop, annual crops that are planted along with a perennial crop to assist in the establishment of that perennial crop. So in the chat, can anyone give me some examples of nurse crops that are common in your area or what you're going to be doing with that nurse crop? What are other crops are they for? Oats, seeing a few oats. Rye, oats with alfalfa. Yep. Small grain over hay. Yes. Oats, wheat, lots of rye. So seeing a lot of consistency on those. Yep, that's going to be for our alfalfa, rye, oats, barley. Yes, we're looking at our small grains right here. And once again, going with our hay acres. So I tried to make this text as big as possible to have all of it on one for us. So what I'm going to do is I would like to go down the chart. If you guys have an answer, and we're going to go down the chart together here. So I'm going to read through the entire example, give you guys all a moment to digest everything that's asked here, and then we'll fill it out. In 2025, he grew alfalfa that he planted 50 acres for hay on May 1st, 2023, using a drill with 7.5-inch row spacing. He did not use any precision technology and did not apply any soil carbon amendments. He also performed a soil test before planting to determine the nutrients needed to get a good crop growth. The crop was not irrigated. All right, so starting on our chart, and once again, I tried making it as big as possible here for you. So, what is our crop? Alfalfa. All right, so alfalfa, and because I'm not going to make you guys look up our respondent booklet right now, alfalfa, it is 101, and the intended use of hay is 6. So using our respondent booklet, alfalfa is 101. The use is for hay, and so it is a 6. How many are our acres planted? 50. Yes, lots of 50s. It is 50. Please always make sure you include that decimal point with the 0 at the end. If in here you would simply write a 50, rather than having 50 acres of hay, our operator is going to have 5 acres of hay. So those decimal points are very important. Make sure we are always using that decimal point. All right, what day was it planted? 5/1/2023. Yes, that is right. We make sure we use our six digits here for our planting. What about precision technology? What should we? Oh, row width. Sorry, I skipped one. Row width. I saw the answer in there. Sorry. Thank you. 7.5. Once again, make sure you're always including that decimal point. All right. Now, precision technology. No, we did not have any precision technology used in this field. Did we have any soil test? Yes, we did have a soil test, so we had a 1 here. Um, and then soil carbon amendments, it should be a 3. And then was it irrigated? It was not irrigated. So we're going through and we're answering all of our questions in here. Please always remember we have our yes or no's is either a 1 or a 3. Thank you for going through that one with me. We do have the next half of the chart here as well. So now, Farmer Jay's expected yield was 5 tons per acre, but his actual yield was only 4 tons per acre for the 50 acres he harvested. He did not graze the field and he did not leave any forage for wildlife use. So starting at the very top, what is our expected yield? Seeing some fives. Yes. 5, and then our 3 is from the respondent booklet is 4 tons. So once again, I'm going to cheat for you guys with the respondent booklet since I know we do not have it in front of us right now. So we have 5 tons. What was our harvested date? It might be kind of small up here. So, oh, sorry. Acres harvested. I skipped another question. Acres harvested. Okay. Yep. All of our 50. All right. And then our harvest date, it is very small in this chart, but I do have, he harvested the alfalfa on August 7th of 2025. So we right here, we just kind of had some of the processes that we did. Hmm? We want to make sure we use the last harvest date. Oh, what was the actual yield? 4. Yes. So we have 4 was our actual yield. Once again, we're including our decimal point. And for our tons, it is a code 3 again. All right. Did we have anything abandoned in this field? We have anything abandoned? 0 acres? No. So right here, I'm going to ask that on these types of things, you're leaving our dashes. So I'm going to be honest, I'm not for sure if this is different from all the other regions, how this was always portrayed. I'll be honest, I do not have phenomenal handwriting. And as I start writing, by page 5, my numbers do not always look like numbers. Thank goodness I can still read my own handwriting though. So if you're using a dash, this really helps because sometimes zeros turn into 6s and 9s. So to ensure that it stays clear throughout the questionnaire, whenever it's a 0 and we're not, or whenever it's a 0 in these things, we're going to enter a dash. All right. Was the grass, vegetation, straw, or stubble harvested? Yes, we were harvested. And was it grazed? Okay, we're seeing some threes. No, we did not graze this at all. Because of this, we actually get to skip down to T. Was any forage intentionally left behind for wildlife? No, we're going down no again. So I'm gonna go dive one step deeper on these pieces. So one thing I have seen in the past is that there shouldn't be anything in here, and there's just a big line drawn down the middle. What does that look like when it gets to keen? Can anyone give me a guess what that looks like? It looks like a bunch of ones. Do we want a lot of ones in this part right here? No, we do not. So the correct thing is this must be left blank or have the dashes. Okay? Another big part right here is, as you can notice, our yes, no's, they're all threes and ones. So make sure if it is a yes or a no, we're answering our yeses, we're answering our no's. Dash or skipped. Um, a dash or skipping, you can just leave them blank. That is a to circle, or you can circle the skips if it to help avoid errors. Mm-hmm. All right. How was O determined? I'm gonna throw my answer, and Angela, if she has something different, will say it. It was determined as harvested because it was a grass and we did harvest it for hay. So that was why I put O as a one. Angela's not yelling at me, so I'm gonna assume we are good on that
Agree.
one.
I couldn't find the button. I agree.
Thank you. So that obviously could be different if you're looking at um a crop or corn, soybeans, things like this, but it's vegetation and it is being harvested. Okay. All right. So I am not going to make you fill out all of these pieces. We had at the very beginning that the alfalfa was planted in 2023. So for 2024, if it was strictly alfalfa again, that chart is going to look similar to 2025. So here we're going to when the oats were planted with that alfalfa. So as you can notice, we're going through here and we're filling out all of these pieces for our chart for 2023 when the oats and the alfalfa were put in together. Stephanie, I did not do any vegetable or fruit examples in here. If you have something in particular, similar to what I said for arms 3 yesterday, let's hold it to the end and then we can see if we can come up with some practice examples on those areas. All right, can we clarify? I was understanding there should be no dashes or zeros. Please do not enter zeros. You can enter a dash. Okay. The reason I always said dashes were nice is it says this question was asked, there is no value here. That is where it's very nice for the editors to see. I know that this should be blank. Okay. Is the dash only on CEAP? Um, I will be honest, it's really going to depend on what paper surveys are like in the future. Because CEAP is paper only at this, I mean, and we have ARMS 2 and well, ARMS 2 is done. Fruit Chem is going on in some areas. I would always encourage if a value is 0, you can put a dash in there. It does not appear because it's a straight line, it does not key in anything. But like I said, it helps the editors know I asked this question, there is no value here. If you're going to put an NA next to the or in that cell, it just needs to be beside it. So if you want to put 0 or no or something like that, anything that's not the exact variable that needs to be in the cell needs to go to the side. So the dashes that I entered for the only dash that I entered earlier was because he didn't harvest anything, or sorry, because he did harvest everything. So we had a dash because nothing was abandoned. That is reflected from above, but it's just kind of like your second check of, yep, everything was harvested. If you're doing skips, you do not need to put NA beside it. You can leave them completely blank on your skips. Like I said, it's just a matter of keeping it clean. It's for you and then also for the editors as you're going or as they're going through. All right. Yes, I like it. Arms 3, there's only 1 0. Yes. All right, so once again, we're just going to go through a few highlights here. This is continuing on from the page before. So right here, we did harvest our oats. So we're having that information for our oats. The alfalfa was just being established, so we did not harvest our alfalfa in that first year of production, which is where now, or sorry, so here's where our oats, that information, we're including our harvested information. And if we jump to N, this is where our 50 acres of alfalfa are abandoned because they were not yet established in 2023.
Can I jump in here? Sorry to interrupt.
Nope, that's all right.
I'm going to go way back to O in there just because
Okay.
it came up at the last one where the um, um, the vegetation after the fact harvested. Let's see. Was the grass vegetation straw or stubble harvested? In the manual, it says this does not apply for crops with permanent plantings such as hay. Line O should be recorded with a 3 for no. So
All right. Angela just put a very long thing in the chat. Would you like to talk, Angela?
So I did change my answer after I had said that because I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Grass, right? Or
correct.
grass is not hay. I get
Right.
or alfalfa. And so yeah, I went and looked in the manual and I pulled it up and copied that section that you just read in
Thank you.
there and fully agree. Yes, if it is a permanent planting such as hay. So any type of hay, because hay is different, whether it's alfalfa or clover, if it's a perennial planted, harvested many years in a row, that
Bermuda. Yeah.
doesn't qualify, and that's a 3. O would be would be no for a permanent planting or a multiple year planting of hay. So that's
Thank you.
All right.
just looking for grain where so this item is was grass vegetation. So I don't know if they're considering like around the field borders, straw or stubble harvested after grain was removed. So to me, that means a small grain, corn. I know some people bale soybean stubble.
I think it's more if they're using, if there's a second use of the crop that they put in, they're harvesting it as a second use, like the stubble or
Yes. I think that's a great way to look at it. Yes.
All right. We have updated the slide now, so it will be correct in future presentations. I apologize. I actually stole this from NAS, so it did not get updated after it. Thank you, Linda, for jumping in to clarify that. All right. This is after our chart, and this is where we're asking about the rotation of the field. So for this example, what we're saying is Farmer Jay's planted crop rotation on a 4-year alfalfa corn, with alfalfa for 3 years, followed by corn every year. Please remember to include the oat nurse crop that we had in our first year. And for this one, because corn is falling outside of our 3 years, it's going to be next year. This is where it's going to say, this is going to tell NRCS there is more to that field other than just this alfalfa. Okay. All right. Next, we're going to go over double cropping. So double cropping involves growing 2 crops in the same field during the same crop year, but not at the same time as it is with interseeding or strip cropping. In the case of double cropping, one crop is typically planted late in fall or early spring, and then another crop is planted later in the year after the first crop is harvested. The key point is both crops are harvested in the same crop year. So, could I get some examples? What are examples in your area of double cropping? Please know as you're going through that this is for your area, so some people could have different things. Peas and bees, wheat and soybeans. Oh, I moved really quick there. Double soybeans. Yeah, there are double soybeans. Means rye and soybeans, wheat and milo. Very good. Around here, I'm told no time. There are some areas it's not common to do double cropping. All right. Thank you. All right. So I'm not actually going to go through this entire chart right here, but what I would like to emphasize is that we need to make sure we're accounting for both crops. And unlike earlier where we're looking at the same planting dates or we're looking at same information throughout the entire chart, you could have different information, and there are some areas like planting date that you will have different information provided. And this is just kind of the bottom part of the chart. It's the same thing. We're going to have similar, it's the same field, but our harvesting and possibly our acres could slightly vary as well. All right, for this one, this is another thing of please just make sure we're including both, or it does have 3, all crops in for every single year rotation. All right, recording cover crops. So cover crops are grown primarily to cover the soil rather than for harvest. However, in some cases, they can be harvested. So cover crops are essential for improving soil health, preventing erosion, and enhancing diversity in agricultural systems. They are typically planted during fallow periods or between cash crops to provide environmental and agricultural benefits. So I'm just going to kind of show a little bit of where these are going to look between the 2 charts that we just discussed. So our first one, we do have a cover crop. And we need to make sure it's in question 1 and in question 3. So for right here, we have our winter wheat, and our intended use of a 4 indicates that it is a cover crop. So when we're going on to question 3, also in section C, which is shown to the right, when you have that, we need to make sure that that cover crop, we're asking a little bit more information here, is included in question 3. So if we're ever seeing something with the intended use of 4, it needs to be accounted for in item 3 as well. Okay, if a crop was abandoned, we do both in C as well. So if you have an abandoned crop, was flooded, whatever the case may be, that is where, oh, I'm going to go back a few slides. I apologize. That is where, oh, I'm going to go back a few more. Right here, we're number N, right where it's actually bolded, were any acres abandoned. So if you're having something abandoned, like corn or soybeans or some sort of grain crop, please put a comment as to why, because we don't typically expect them to abandon those types of commodities. Sorry, I'm going to get back to where we were. All right. The next one is if we have a cover crop terminated by or harvesting forage or grain. So a date harvested should be recorded, and once again, it should match the termination date in question 3. So if we're going over here, we can see our planted date, and going down to I, we also, or sorry, L, we also have a harvested date. Those same dates are transferring over to question 3 of when was it planted, when was it terminated, and then the terminated code is a 6 as it being harvested. All right, a cover crop if it is being grazed. Once again, we're going to transfer that information over. So I know we didn't have that in ours earlier, but in our chart right here, was it grazed? We have a 1 for yes, and we provide a little bit more information about the grazing. We go over to question 3. Was it grazed? Yes. Okay, I went through those fairly quickly. I didn't want to have to go through every single question, but the main part was to get those connections throughout the questionnaire as well. So just like all of our other pieces, or just like we kind of went through with ARMS 3 yesterday of everything's tied to something, it's going to be the same thing with CEAP. If we're reporting it here as a cover crop, we're going to have it covered in question 3 and answer a few additional questions as well. All right, so just a recap for right here, make sure we record each crop in the correct year. Remember, crop year, the year the crop was harvested or terminated. Okay, so you can have that planting in the fall, or like our nurse crop a couple of years ago, but or for the alfalfa, it was planted years ago, but we need to record each harvest year. All right, do we have any questions about section C? All right, hearing none, I'm gonna do what I did yesterday, guys. My next section is going to be a little bit longer because we are diving into D and we're starting to get into some of our charts. So we're gonna take a break a little bit earlier just so we don't extremely bypass our time. So I have 53 right now. We're gonna go ahead. It'll be slightly over 10. I'm sorry, I like the tens. So we're gonna start back at 05. So once again, we're gonna take a little break because the next section's a little longer. We will meet back here at 5 after. And I start with, there were a couple questions in the chat that I want to address before we get started in our next section. The first one is about where to find the materials. That makes me a little nervous because hopefully before you came here, we all watched the videos. I do know that emails were shared, so possibly it was just viewed by emails. However, all materials are on the NASDA website. If you go to your regional page and then the particular survey page. If there are some people who would like to see where that is at the end of the presentation, if we go after all of our normal talking points today, we can show the NASDA websites for people if someone is interested in that. Um, there was another question is can the page show marketing charges be uploaded to the training materials? I'm assuming that is referring to ARMS 3. I can talk to the ARMS 3 team. I'm going to be honest, I'm not for sure if that is going to be something that we'll be able to do, but I can pass that along and see if it is an option. Okay, thank you for verifying because I asked Angela, I'm like, I don't think we have any of that in CEAP. So go on to ARMS 3. I will see if we can do that. All right, before I jump in, were there any other questions or comments that I missed?
Hi, PA. Penelope. We can start with CEAP right away. I got 8 sent in last night. And then there's no materials being sent to us.
So we'll discuss all of the dates and everything towards the end. I'll just start with all your coaches and managers have all of the materials for CEAP. So if you do not have them yet, you will be receiving them. Um, but yes, as soon as we are done with our training and you have your materials, you can start data collection.
Oh, okay. So we'll be being sent. I've got the same people that I did the original
Yep.
questioning on. And I've kept all those fields and things. Are they going to be the same?
If they were eligible for the survey, yes, it's a good possibility they move forward. Please note from phase one to phase two, we did have those that were eligible or ineligible. Even a completed phase one could be ineligible. We also could have had if he was a potential duplicate, like he had multiple fields that were selected, so that was another option on one where some of your samples could be less. And I will be honest, it wasn't a ton, but NRCS did have like a threshold of what they wanted for phase two. So it is possible that even if an operator was complete, eligible, and a single person, one report, that they did not move on to phase two. It should not be a ton in that category. I'll be honest, I don't think we really far exceeded their threshold, but there is potential that if someone was eligible, they just didn't move on. They were not selected for phase two.
Okay, but it will be the same field as in phase one.
Correct. Everything that we're asking here is based on the data collected for phase one.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. We are going to dive into section D, fertilizer applications. Oh, before I did, one more question. The memo says we have 6 hours for ARMS. There should be ARMS 3 and CEAP. Yes, you have 6 hours for ARMS 3, 6 hours for CEAP. And I know we're all here because we are experienced enumerators, but like I mentioned yesterday, please use that time. For ARMS 3, it's been a whole year. It's actually been 2 since we've had an ARMS 3. Use that time, watch the videos. Same thing for CEAP. We want to make sure we are reviewing the materials, watching all the videos that NRCS and the NASDAQ created for us.
Once again, is the 4 hours today and yesterday counted as part of our 6 hours for each survey?
No, that is
Oh,
part of your
wonderful.
home study time. This is your training for that, for
Oh,
these surveys.
goody. Thank you.
You're welcome. Um, Julia, for ARMS 3, where is the quiz? I'm going to be honest, I haven't gotten it from NAS yet, which is why it hasn't gotten posted. I have relayed information to the coaches that, depending on when it is received, they can determine the best route for their groups. So when it comes to things like the quizzes, any of those materials, please refer to your coach on expectations for that. All right. I don't see anything else popping up. So I'm going to jump back to our section D. Oop, there it goes. All right, so we're going to talk about how to record our fertilizer applications. And then once again, as we kind of talked about with section C, is we're going to talk about how those relationships between section D are throughout the rest of the questionnaire. We're also going to talk about fertilizer analysis, actual nutrient applications, application method, and then our breakdown of nitrogen. All right. I want to start by saying you do not need to be an expert in all of the chemicals and fertilizers. As I pointed out earlier, there is a reason I brought Angela in today to hopefully be able to answer all of your questions. The main thing is, as you're going, you're asking the farmer their questions and you're writing down what they provide for you. If there is something that looks a little odd, but that is the data the farmer gives you, write that information and make a note. That way, either NAS, NRCS, as they're reading it, they can see this is what that operator provided you. Whether it, like I said, it looks a little unusual or not, they know that question was asked and this is the data that was provided. So in general, fertilizer is going to be reported by analysis. So that's meaning column 4 is going to be no more than 85. Sulfur and filler materials are going to make up for the rest of the materials in the commercial fertilizers. If all four ingredients added together, or all four ingredients added together, are never going to exceed 100. Okay. So those are just some quick little pieces on there. We're expecting it not to be over 85. We're never going to have it over 100. All right, before I start in this section, I'm going to be honest, I stole these charts and they were screenshots. So you're going to see some zeros. I know we already went through the dashes earlier. Please write a dash, leave it empty. Do not put zeros in the chart. So I apologize. We do have zeros in the example, but please dashes or blank. All right, so going through, if you can see the green line, we're looking at a percent of each nutrient presented in the materials. Okay. That is going to be multiplied by our column 5, which is the total amount of material applied per acre. And that is where we're coming up with our total amount of each nutrient. All right, so for this one right here, we're looking at a percent analysis based on the amount used is going to come up with what our amount of the nutrients per acre. And the next one, if your operator provides actual amounts of nutrients that was applied, this is where we're going to leave column 5 blank and column 6, as we can see, 19, it's our pounds of actual nutrients. Okay. So based on it, whether it's a percent, we're going to have something in column 5. If we are provided actual amounts used or actual nutrients, column 5 needs to be blank. All right, knowing how the fertilizer, we're going to jump to application method. Knowing how the fertilizer was applied helps analyze the effects on agricultural production. So this is going to help determine effects on runoff, the leaching of nutrients, effects on availability of nutrients of the crop. If broadcast with incorporation, which is code 2, it's important that we're also going to capture that in field option sections later in our questionnaire. And we'll have some screenshots of that here in a little bit as well. All right, so products that are going to slow nitrogen breakdown. Knowing if a product is used to slow the breakdown of nitrogen, that's going to help NRCS analyze the effects on agricultural production. What are the effects of runoff, leaching, the volatilization of nutrients, also the effects of availability of a nutrient to that crop. So right here we have a few examples of different things that are going to reduce ammonia emissions and different sort of processes in chemicals. So if they're using these, it's helping break down or slow the breakdown of nitrogen in the soil. Knowing if a product is ammonia-based or not will also help estimate nitrogen loss. So once again, in the same process, we're looking at seeing or what the nitrogen is in the soil. All right, let's look at the relationships between section D to other pieces. So right here, I know I mentioned just a moment ago a fertilizer with broadcast with incorporation. So if we have anything that is with incorporation, we want to make sure that it is included in our field ops later on. So right here, we have our tillage operation. We have it reported in section D on the right side of our screen. Because we have how it is applied is a 2, that's telling us we're expecting to see something later in our questionnaire. Okay? So we just got done with section C, where item 3D, commercial fertilizer applied to a cover crop. So once again, it's telling us we're going to need something later on. So in section C, right here on the left side of the screen, you can see that he reported a 1 for yes of did you apply commercial fertilizer for the benefit of a cover crop. Because they reported 1 here, when we go over to our commercial fertilizers or section D, you can see where that fertilizer is reported and asking for more information. The big part here is we want to ensure we report the application in proper amounts. If fertilizer analysis, the percent of nutrients is given in column 4, be sure to fill out column 5 with the total amounts of fertilizer blend applied per acre. If actual pounds of nutrients are entered in column 4, once again, we're leaving column 5 blank and we're reporting it as actual nutrients. We're recording whether nitrogen slow breakdown products were used and if the fertilizer was ammonia based. We want to also, as we showed there at the end, we always want to make sure our relationships are reflected between every single section. All right, and I saw a few things popping in the chat while we were going through here. All right. Angela did answer them in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and read these out for everyone to be able to see what was asked. Last time operators told me they contracted out to apply fertilizer. I made a note and did not gather data from the contractee. Is that okay? Yes, this is an acceptable practice. It would be best to get an estimate of nutrients application rates. Oh, just a second. If the respondent remembers or can pull it off of the bill. So if you have someone else who is applying that fertilizer, if we can get that information, we would like to get that information. If we can't, a comment definitely, as you put in there, we need to have those remarks that it did happen. Oh, and follow on if it goes on the future sections if someone else is applying. We want to make sure we try and collect that data. If an operator doesn't know the answer to a question, would the stats prefer a don't know beside the box or a -1 inside the box? Angela, I am going to ask you on this one. Which would you prefer?
If it's something you need to answer, let's go with don't with DK by the box. I'm going to ask because it's been a long time since I've had this direct contact. I mean, Debbie, have they been using -1 in the past? I mean, I don't mind.
We use it in CAPI, but generally I would say on ARMS 3, I'd always recommend it being outside of the box. So,
Then stand with that practice.
okay. So if you have any cells that are unknown, we're going to make a remark outside of the box. Okay. If you use sheep, it's better for the ground. Oh, I like that one. If you use sheep, it's better for the ground for applying your fertilizer. Is there a summary sheet showing fields that relate to each other? So I
Just a
actually have something that
relationship.
we are going to discuss it a little bit at the end. There is an edit sheet that Angela and the NAS team provided for us. So yes, we do have something to help with those relationships in the questionnaire. I have a picture of it later, but it is on the website for you to view. Affect the totals. If you click a calculator, will it populate as -1 in the cell? So yes, but please remember for CEAP, this is all paper. NRCS will eventually be getting our paper questionnaires, which is why this survey is 100% paper. Okay. How do you make an outside the box remark? The big thing I would like you to remember when you're making your comments, we're never putting it in where data belongs. So I'm just going to go back a couple slides right here. So for this example, this area right here, I'm sorry, I know my mouse probably isn't very dark. Let me see if I can manipulate this really quick. What page? I'm on cropping here.
Well, Debbie's looking to change her mouse. I'm going to throw out when those come to the NOD completed, they're going through a machine that's tapping all of the books so they all align, and then they are cutting off the spine where the staple is. So if you could stay away from that center space and write at the top, right at the bottom, or put in like here in this area, C note page, what have you, if you know, because there's or see back cover for a better note. Those are always open places.
Yeah. So right here, this would be a great spot to leave comments on it. As she also mentioned above, I would not necessarily go below the charts because usually they are at the very bottom of the page, but try and use that open space. The only things that go in that cell is what the data should be for that cell. Okay. I like that. We have a few remarks on that one too. But yes, they'll put it in the margins. Angela had a great thought of put it at the front or the back if you run out of space and just put where it's related to. Angela, there's another question in the chat for you, please. Are FRP considered under this section?
What is FRP? I'm
Jessica, can you unmute
Jessica, can
and
you help me? Either type it in the chat or come off mute.
food?
Oh, let me think on that. You're the first one to bring that up. I'm thinking whey, and if that's as an option, like in cheese production. Let me think about it and I will type a response in the chat.
All right. For leaving more notes in the future, honestly, the survey they put space as they can. There was a great comment of last year they were told to use an additional page and write the question on there. If you have a lot of notes, that is a phenomenal idea to have a second page. If you're doing that, please make sure you have the state and the POID on top of the questionnaire because if for some reason it gets lost, we want to make sure it gets tied to the correct record. All right. Lots of good comments and notes in there. All right. We're going to jump into section E, manure. So one of the outcomes of widespread adoption of nutrient management plans, which are major emphasis in the Farm Bill, is necessary to estimate to an extent which land is available and and able to receive manure applications. So section E first screens for manure applications, then item 2 will direct you to complete the manure application table. The questions after the table are general manure information, the source, form, and storage use. We're going to go through a couple examples. Our first one, we're going to start with the 2025 crop year. Was manure or manure compost was applied to the field for the 25, 24, and 23 crop years. And please note all years are recorded in a single table. So you're told that the solid beef manure is applied on corn for grain planted in that field. Manure was applied March in all 3 years. It was a rate of 18 tons per acre, broadcast with incorporation, no manure testing, and it's not composted. So we're going to go to the next slide to show what this looks like. The kind of manure, it was solid beef or beef cattle manure. All right, so I'm not going to go through every piece here in the chart. The big thing I would like to mention, as we said earlier, is all year is going to be included in this one chart. So as you can see to the very left, we have 23, 24, and 25 accounted for in this chart. We have what crop it is, and then the quantity of manure applied to every single or to each of the years. Going through it, we're just taking the information and asking information about that manure. This is just following down to the next page. We did say that there was no testing, which is where we're leaving these first few columns blank. Please leave these We said that they were all in March. Whether they really all are March 5th or not, obviously he may not remember the exact date. Try and be as exact as possible, and then how it was applied. We're going to go over the exact same thing, but we're going to add that there was testing this time. So far, we're really looking at everything as being the same, except for you will note that in column 8, now we have green ones. So previously the answer was no. Now we have that they were tested. And what changes here is our results from that manure analysis test needs to be added in columns 10 and 11. Okay. So once again, all of these questions are going forth. The operator, write down what they provide for you. Make sure if there are something that are left blank or the answers are no, we follow all of our skipping or all of the skips in the chart. Yep, codes for the types of manure are in the questionnaire. Deb, once again, for skips, leave blank. And actually on this chart, if you go forward, you would have answered number 8 if it was not tested as a 3, which indicates our next page needs to be blank. Okay, so really the only blank cells in this chart are because of skips. Okay. All right. Okay, I know I mentioned this last time. I'm going to provide it again. If you are ever given values that you do not know how to enter into this table, I know I've talked about a few times. This is where you're going to leave those notes. Fill out the table as best as you can. Make those notes. You can either reach out to your coach, or if it's once, or please reach out to your coach initially. Hopefully, if it's something you see once, it's going to help you consistently throughout the rest of your questionnaires. However, all of those comments added on the questionnaire will benefit and help NAS and NRCS when the data is received. Okay. Do we have any other questions about manure? Explain the codes. Can you give me, would you like each of the column codes or which piece are you wanting explained here? Sorry, Ralph. The manure knifed in. Are you wanting just like for connections throughout the questionnaire or what? I'm sorry, Ralph, can you just unmute and ask your question? I apologize. I want to make sure I answer what you're wanting specifically.
In column 16, how was it applied? Uh, would is there a difference brought? I don't see the codes there. What are my
Oh,
choices? Because I think knifed in is considered incorporation. And do you include that in the field operations later on?
okay. So, if anything is including some sort of tillage or disturbance of the soil, yes, it will need to be included later in the questionnaire when we're looking at our field ops. I'm jumping over to the questionnaire so I can show you those pieces. We're in section E. Oop. Sorry, if you give me just a second. All right. Here we are. So this is above the chart, very similar to what we see on the other charts as they have um, all of these pieces up above. Give me just a second. I will take a picture of it for you. We're gonna jump through just a tad because I end up putting it right here. So right here, this is what's telling you, once again, this is literally just a picture from above the chart. So all of this information you'll be able to fill out in the questionnaire for this piece.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. That is, I mean, it's very consistent throughout the charts. A lot of things that are very specific to them, like these columns, they're going to be above the chart. Your chemicals, and when you get into field ops and we're talking about farm machinery, what equipment was used, that is when you're going to need to utilize the respondent booklet. Hmm. All right. Another question, what are biosolids? So I'm pretty sure that's taking us. Where do we? I love it. Explanations are in the interviewer manual. You are correct. Do we have that in here? Oh, biosolids. It's a number 11. Angela, could you give us a deeper explanation on when that would be utilized?
Biosolids, let me flip back to the page. So the first screening in the manure section, item 1, determine if any type of manure, including livestock or poultry manure, commercially prepared manure, which I believe is what the sheep pellets falls into, or biosolids, were applied to the selected fields. Include solids and effluents from waste lagoons, waste holding ponds, and waste runoff ponds. So I'm thinking the processing remains will fall into this biosolids. I'm just waiting to hear back from NRCS for official confirmation.
All right. Roberto put on page 107 of the interviewer manual, it's such, or it does include food waste there. So leftovers from human waste processing facilities.
So
All
someone had
right.
made the statement, manure is not always just manure. That is a true statement in this fact. And this would be a good example where if it doesn't fit, if it's atypical of what we're expecting, that's where those notes are really important. Anecdotal, just tell us what you found. I will say
All right.
this, just to add, the survey is a little different than ARMS because NRCS is using this for their own in-house research. They will be doing publications from it, but it's really their own research, and they That's why as much data as you can get in there is a complete survey for them.
All right. You would never do that in Vermont. I don't know what each state will have, but as Angela said, this is for their research to see what is going on out or throughout the entire country. Any other questions? Penelope.
Yes, I just read an article from the Ag Department where they're questioning this human waste usage because there's no control over what people are putting in their bodies and therefore putting in their septic tanks. And they're finding there are all sorts of disgusting things in there that they don't want on the fields.
And the nice thing is, where else are we going to get that research except for here? So kind of like when we were talking about ARMS 3, there are questions on there that are only on ARMS 3. So without that knowledge, without the research of figuring out, like you said, the benefits or the negatives, where are those regulations going to come from? So yes, this is for research to figure out what is truly helping or harming our fields. Good. I like that. This is for non-regulatory purposes. Yes, please always remind them that this is not for regulatory. This is for research purposes only. Yes. All right. That was a really interesting discussion. It was good. Good questions. Do we have anything else before we move on to our pesticides? There are just a couple other comments. It may be non-regulatory, but if it is illegal, operators will not do it or shouldn't. I would agree. Biosolids are very common and very good. And another comment is I recently read that organic food could include food fertilized by biosolids. So definitely there's a lot of different feedback out there. Once again, that is why we are doing this research for NRCS. All right, I don't see any other questions though, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to dive into our next section. All right, we're going to start talking about pesticides. So the first thing, I want some more participation from you. What is a pest? So what is a pest? We have weeds, insects, and diseases. Yes, we even gave a few examples. Anything that attacks the crop. I like that explanation. Anything that is going to attack our crop. Yes, weed, insects, and diseases. So make sure when you're doing this section, you're going to always review the include and exclude statements in the table. In particular, please remember, do not include fertilizers. It is one easy way to know if a chemical might be I do not know how to pronounce this word. I'm sorry, Angela. Can you provide me for an
Adjuvant.
adjuvant? Oh, I was going to say that, but I swore it was going to say it wrong. Thank you. Adjuvant. Easy way to know if a chemical might be an adjuvant is if the chemical does not have an EPA number. Only include pesticide application for the appropriate crop year, pesticide applications after the harvest of a previous crop to the harvest of the current crop. Also, and this goes for all sections, make sure we fill out the entire table. Do not use quotations. Do not draw arrows. Remember earlier when I talked about that one line that goes down the whole area? We do not want any of that. We need to fill out every every row as complete as possible. Christine?
If a farmer uses a fertilizer, just a little bit of fertilizer in with the pesticide application to help uptake, do you want that included back in the fertilizer section?
Yes. Any fertilizer, even if it's applied at the same time with your chemicals, needs to be in the appropriate section.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I know we've had some talk about the respondent booklet, so I just want to have my disclaimer right here. For the respondent booklet, it is an electronic version only. This is going to be very heavily used. Because it's an electronic version only, please download it to your iPad books. Once it's downloaded to your iPad books, you can use it if you have service or if you do not have service. It will be permanently on that iPad until you delete it. I'm just going to give a disclaimer. We had printed some respondent booklets and there were errors. So in order to try and eliminate any confusion, any mix up in those questionnaires, and also based on the timeline, that is where we decided it is going to be electronic only. So if you need assistance downloading that to your iPad, there is some instructions on the website. Otherwise, reach out to your trainer and they can help you get through those steps to get it downloaded to your iPad. Okay. All right, so one fun thing when you're looking at chemicals is you could have one chemical with multiple names and EPA numbers. So this is just one that we picked on. So as you can see, there are 12 different options. How do you know which one to choose? Okay. So there are a couple options that we have. The first one is our column 1, which is the form the product was purchased in before being mixed with anything else. So being liquid or dry automatically is going to knock us out part or half of our list. Probing class, this is probably a bad example. However, these are all herbicides. It is possible that looking there can also help you narrow down your selection. Okay, and this is what is listed for all of our chemicals that we have. The last and the best way to distinguish is to utilize spray records or a product label to find the EPA registration number for the product, which is listed in our column 5, which is brown here. So as we look at these first 5, they are literally the same. The next 2 are the same. The bottom 3, they are the complete same. So one thing that we want to look at is if you look at the EPA number, even though they are the same name, they can have different concentrations. So in this example, it was looked up that the first one has a concentration of 42.1% and the other one has 41% of glyphosate. So it could even larger differences of up to 53% where others are 41. So if we are provided the wrong, if we enter the wrong one, we are reporting that field differently. So I know it is taking a few extra steps. It may take a little bit more time, but it is very important that we are always recording the correct product code for these chemicals. Okay. There was a question if we can use the respondent booklet that came with ARMS 2. I will say there are some similarities to it. However, there are different pieces. So make sure that when we're looking at CEAP, we're using our CEAP respondent booklet. When we have our ARMS 2, we use our ARMS 2 respondent booklet. And like I said, the nice thing is yesterday we're saying we're doing everything on the iPad. Because this is a paper questionnaire, you can actually, like I said, download it to books. I highly suggest playing with it because you can search. So the nice thing is on paper, it is in alphabetical order. However, you can actually search for different product codes um, and product names here, and it can easily take you to where you want to go throughout your respondent booklet. So taking a few minutes to work with that, I think would be very helpful before you start your interviews. How do you download it to your iPad books? There are instructions on the NASDA webpage. I think it truly is called How to Download a PDF to Books. I believe that is what it's called. But there is one on the CEAP survey page on how to download it to books. All right, what are we going to do if a record or a chemical is not in the respondent booklet? So I know I have a little bit of a cheat, it's down at the bottom, but can anyone tell me what we need to do if we do not have it in the respondent booklet? What in the chart and also below the table, what are things that we need to make sure we account for? Notes. I love it. Google it. Yeah. Ask again and again. Put it at the bottom. At times you can find an EPA number online. Mm-hmm. Very good. Those are some good remarks. So if you ever encounter a pesticide that is not in the respondent booklet, we want to ask the respondent or use the spray records. Also, like they said, we have some of those remarks of you can sometimes find things online. We want to find the EPA registration name and the name of the product. We need the form that was purchased in, either liquid or dry. And if we cannot get an EPA number, the location purchased. Okay. So we're going to go through a couple examples of things that cannot be found in the respondent booklet. So right here, we have two different lines. As you can see on the top line, we have a name and an EPA number. We have both information there. That is amazing. So if you get to that very last column, we don't need to know where it was purchased because we know that EPA number. On our bottom line, we only have the name. So that is where we need to ask, where did you purchase this chemical? Because once it gets to NAS, there will be more research to try and find that chemical. Okay. Some operators may have unopened bags. Yes, you could still have some of those, and there may be custom blended products available. So those are both good comments. Once again, make sure you are providing as much information as possible. Yes, this information that we're providing, these are in the training videos. Yes, I like that that remark was made. Please, if you have not, we need to make sure we are watching all of our videos. So the main takeaway here is we're still going to make sure we are recording this in our chart, and we are recording this information under our chart as well. All right, we're actually going to go through an example here. So atrazine 4L was applied to corn. It is a liquid product. It is 1 quart per acre was applied on June 1st by ground broadcast fuller application. It was applied to the entire 40-acre field. So this is where I'd like you guys to help me out again. What goes in our very first column? So it doesn't even have a column 1 or 2. It's the very first. What is our product name? Atrazine. Yes. So I actually going to go one step further. Try and be as specific as possible. So it was atrazine. They specifically said 4L. So we want to make sure we are including that in the full product name. Because like I said, especially if we have an EPA number, or we're unsure, we want to be as specific as possible. Oh, almost cheated there. What was our crop? So column 2, what do we put for our primary crop? Corn. Yep. And they told it was for grain. So if we go ahead and even get that grain included, be as specific on our crop. Because, and I know we don't have it, I do have it up above that our crop code is 188 for corn for grain. All right, what products were applied? What is going to go in this column 4? Yes, that is where that digit, it's getting pulled from our respondent booklet. We included it right here for you. This is where if we know what that product is, we need to make sure it is included. If it's not, if this item is blank, the table below the chart has to be completed. All right, column 5. Was it a liquid or was it L or D? L. Yes, we're going to put an L here. We don't know if it's part of a tank mix. I did not include that right here. For this instance, we're saying it is not. So we will skip our tank mix at this time. We're going to go to the second page. When was it applied? What goes in our column 7?
Date.
I have that wrong. I apologize. That should be 060125. I apologize. That is wrong. We would have this as a 6-digit, not a 10. So do better than me and I will fix that slide here in a moment. It was applied on June 1st, 25. How much was applied per acre? So do we have something in column 8 or 9? Yep, we're going to have 1. We said it was per acre, and we want to make sure that we have those decimal points. Very similar to what I said earlier. If you would not include your decimal points, all of a sudden this would actually come in as 0.01 rather than 1.00. We want to make sure all of that data is being translated correctly because that is a very different use per acre. And I know I saw this already, but it is a code 13 for quarts. We want to make sure that those two are related properly of if it's liquid, we're having a liquid unit. If it is a dry, we're having a dry unit in our column 10. All right, how was the product applied? And I apologize, I popped it up right here. So how was it applied? What column what code should we have? CN 13s. Yep, we did broadcast. We're going to have our 13 for how the product was applied. For column 12, what code should we have in column 12? All right, yep, we did it for our entire field. And how many acres are in our field? For our last column, 40.0 acres in our field. Yes. Once again, make sure we are accounting for that decimal point. Okay. Awesome. Thank you for those of you who joined with me on answering some of those questions. All right, next, we're actually going to dive into if it was a tank mix. So I'm not going to make us go through and fill out all of those pieces again, but I would like to show what it's going to look like. So right here, we have the columns that we just completed, and I also added our herbicide here for us. However, there was one error in this, there was one error in this picture right here. So can someone tell me what our error was, or what error is on this page? I think column 1132. Uh, columns, box, yes. So what our error is if you're having a tank mix, there are a few pieces that need to be the same. All right, so for this one, we need to make sure our crop is the same. If it is part of a tank mix, those must be equal. You need to have the start, all of the products in the tank mix need to have the same number in column 6. Needs to be applied at the same time, and the application on how it is applied needs to be the same for 11 through 13. All right, do we have any questions on tank mixes? All right, hearing none, we're going to go through a couple different scenarios. Once again, I'm not going to make us fill out another chart, but we're just going to talk about them a little bit. So we have a spot or a partial treatment. So if you have a spot treatment, our pesticide is only applied to a small spot of the field. Partial treatment, pesticide is uniformly applied to a portion of the field. You can see here our spot on the left. You can just see a few little dots along the rail. When we're looking at our partial, it's a larger area covering the whole field. Okay? So if you're ever having a spot treatment, this is rare, and we need to make sure we're having a comment when this happens as well. All right, so once again, this is the verbiage that's going. We have some sort of spot treatment. Okay, I'm not going to read all over it. The main thing I want to take away here is how it is reported in our chart. So we're still filling out all of our columns. Item 12, we're having a spot treatment, and we're expecting a very small amount in how many acres this is applied. Okay. We're also how much was applied per acre. We're not going to be having per acre. What is that total applied to the field? Do we have any questions on spot treatment? I know I'm not going over this in as much detail. I just want you guys to get the visuals of what it looks like. Okay. All right. Next, we're going to have a partial treatment. So once again, I have a very similar situation. And this is where you can have, notice that column 12 is now a part of it. How many acres? It's going to be a little bit larger. I mean, depending on the size of the field, but this is larger than our spot treatment. Also, because we are doing so many acres, you can also have it in column 8 for your applied per acre. All right, I went through. Oh, there were a few questions. I'll make sure we have in here. All right, if a field application takes 2 days, pick the day a majority of the acres are covered. Okay, so if you have multiple days of applications, the day that most of the majority of the acres are covered. Do you have any other questions on partial treatments? All right. Next, we're going to go over strip copying. I'm going to admit that this is very rare. I'm going to assume a majority of you will not be seeing it. However, I would like to discuss this just in case this is something you see. So as a reminder, there is a video out there with lots of great information. Please, if you have not, you need to watch those CEAP videos. But this is what happens when if the operator applies a pesticide to an entire strip crop field. Then what you must do is you need to list each crop on a separate line with the same application information. You need to enter a 2 in column 12 to indicate a partial field treatment. So really, strip cropping is just a special case of partial field pesticide application. Another situation is when only the strips belonging to one crop is treated with a pesticide. In that case, it would still be a partial field treatment, which we just discussed. And of course, if an operator only treats one strip, that would be a standard partial treatment. Okay? So we're going to just take that information as best as we can from an operator. Becky? Oh, either Becky, you're still muted or your hand low
No,
layer.
nope, sorry.
Okay.
I hit the lower hand and forgot to unmute. We're seeing more and more drone applications. So would those be considered broadcast by aircraft? And I'm assuming they would not, that we're going to get partial field, like instead of 40 acres, would it be a lesser amount?
You want me to jump in, Debbie? Okay,
Oh, you unmuted, so that's why I stopped talking.
Thanks.
yes, I would call drone coverage by aircraft. I think that's the best category to put it. I would also beg and plead that if you get something unusual like that, because that is not something that we have seen widespread across the country, NRCS is going to love to know that that was specifically drone applied. So if you would please put that note, and I will, they look at every page that you guys write down, they look at. So that note will get back to them. So please put put that drone coverage down. And I have heard for smaller fields, drones are covering the entire thing. And I have heard it's taking that kind of helicopter, airplane, market for fungicide, when you don't want to drive over the plant because the plant is full size.
Mhm.
So yeah, we're gonna learn a lot. And yes, definitely drone, aircraft.
Would that be considered
So,
variable rate then also?
I It could be. I don't want to
Okay,
say absolutely yes or absolutely no because I
but make sure to ask.
definitely, because I believe that is also their niche in that drone technology, is that they are able to do it at a variable rate and target, ooh, you have an infestation here that's really heavy, so we're going to put this here, and then other parts of the field we might do something different.
Right.
Yes.
so there are remarks in the chat that drone or broadcast by drone is an option. They said it was item 77. So that
Perfect.
is an
Thank
option.
you. I love that. I love
Yes,
all
thank you
this
for
help. It's great.
I know they helped me quite a bit yesterday as well. Um, and Angela, because you were not part of our ARMS 3 discussion yesterday, my brother actually got a drone for fungicide this year, and it is growing. They it is something that is, I foresee will be a little bit more common in years in the future. So yes,
And
definitely if you have a drone, make sure we're asking all the same questions.
I have a manure application, the biosolids. I have a response for that when you're ready.
Okay. While you're talking, if you want to go ahead and give us that answer.
Okay. And RCS would, as we discussed, manure can be more than just solid waste that they are trying to get rid of as far as animal excrement. So they want that recorded in the table as we would expect it to be. And then if they are applying anything atypical outside of what we would expect it to be, weigh, animal parts, what have you, put that in a note in that section. In this application, they also applied this. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So going back to our strip cropping. So I do have a question I'm going to ask you to fill out right here. I have a majority of the chart filled out. You, like I said on the last slide, you're going to fill out that information for each crop. And the big reason is because column 2, what is your primary crop? However, I have a question mark in our column 13 for our corn. So how many acres are we going to include in column 13? Oh, I already see some answers on here. Yes, thank you. So, the number of acres, we had 5 20-acre strips of corn. 5 times 20 is 100. I know my calculation, I did not include the zero or the decimal, but down in column 13, 100.0 acres. Thank you. All right, the supplement sheet. So depending on where you are, some people are going to be putting a lot more, could be using a lot more chemicals depending on the crop and your area. So if an operator applied more than 15 pesticides to a field in a given crop year, then you need to use the pesticide supplement. I know we already talked, not everyone has materials. Coaches were provided a supply, and these are also online if you would like to go print one from the NASDA webpage. So, as I mentioned earlier, it's very important to have information if you ever include extra sheets. So right here, and I apologize, my table actually kind of moved to the next line, but we want to make sure you have the CEAP ID written on the top of the questionnaire, and this is exactly from it. What you're going to do is you need to make sure you include the table number. So if you are doing this for, so you want to make sure that each time you're saying it's supplement 102 is 202 or 203. So if you have 2 supplements for each or for a previous year, 201 is supplement 1, supplement 2 is 202, supplement 3 is 203. Okay. We want to make sure that we're always including that information for them for all of our extra pages.
Debbie, can I muddy the water a minute?
Yes.
So the way this example is written, it is that means you would have 3 supplements for 2024.
Okay.
Just so if you need a supplement for 2025, it would be 101. And then if you need a supplement for 2024, it would be 201. Just so we're all. My recommendation, if there's any confusion, is to put right up by the table box, The supplement is for in the year. Then there's no confusion. So if you are second guessing, just put the year up there. This supplement is for supplement page 1 for 2024, and we can get it coded correctly.
I do not think that muddied it. Thank you for that clarification. Another thing that would probably be helpful for NAS, right here we have to have the CEAP ID. Once again, for keying purposes, it'd probably be phenomenal if you just write the POID, state POID on top. That just helps if it does get lost for keying purposes as well. Okay. All right. So I'm jumping a few pages to page 23 of the questionnaire. So we're past the charts, but kind of since we just talked about some of these added codes, we wanted to make sure that we clarified the codes for the pest control applications section. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go over if something was a complete, a refusal, or a valid zero. Because we have all 3 years here, it was nice we could put them all on one chart. But if an operator is complete, we're going to have a 1. Yes, he had pesticides, and he's completing that section with us. So the completion code is blank. We don't need to fill anything out. He provided us that information. If an operator refused to provide this information, once again, they have pesticides. We're going to put a 1 in because the answer is yes, but they're not providing that information. So the completion code is now a 1. If it is a valid 0, no, they do not have anything, and our completion code is a 3. Okay? So once again, if they have something, these are similar, but they're independent of each other. So the top one, yes, they have something, is a 1. No, they don't have anything is a 3. You need to complete the completion code if there is no data that will be filled out in the following sections. So a 1, it's not filled out for whatever reason, operator refused. Valid 0 is a 3. Why a 3, not a 2, just curious? I'm going to guess it probably follows the same concept of 3s as our no's. That was just what it was coded. Honestly, I don't know the long-term reasoning on that. All right. I have gone way past our next break time, and I apologize. Do we have, oh, before we go, that was specific. Okay, so the valid 0 and the 24 complete and 25 not, there were just 3 columns, so it made it easy to show the differences. So if they refuse to provide the information, that is what you would fill it out for. If they have information and it's going to be completed, that is how it's going to look. So once again, it's not this is the same operator. This is how you would provide it if they're providing this information or not providing this information. A valid 0. So here is our question. In which of the following years were any products applied to the field to control weeds, insects, or disease? If the answer is no, so they did not, the answer to this question is no, that is where it is a valid 0. And we'd follow our enumerator action to go to section G. Hmm. So once again, it may not make sense in one operator, but this is just to show those completion codes side by side. All right. As I said, I apologize. I've already gone over that. All right. No, like I said, it was strictly to show what codes you need to be in there. That was all it was. It's not saying an operator will provide you one, not provide another, and have a survey zero for another year. It's just that was how you would record it if it is a refusal. You need to answer that question for each of the years. Um, you need to complete that for each year on whether it is a complete and filled out complete refusal or a yes refusal or a valid zero. Jerry, I think, oh, I thought I wrote this down. It's on page 23 in the questionnaire. So this chart, this is the number one is what I referenced. That's on page 23. It's a couple pages after the chart we reviewed a little bit ago. Penelope?
Hi, can we put a don't know if they don't know rather than they're refusing?
So there are a few other questions underneath this. If they don't know any of the data, it would still technically be incomplete. You can put that as the reason why it is incomplete. The operator doesn't know this information. However, I more suspect that what you would have is you would just put a don't know by certain pieces down the line rather than a don't know to the entire section.
Okay.
Yep. Good question. Are there any other questions before we move on? All right, seeing none. Like I said, you guys are probably already ready for a little bit of a break here. So before we move on, it is 22 after on my side because that's an awkward number. We're going to go ahead and start back up at 32. We're going to stick with our full 10 minutes right here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause the recording and we have about and we are going to get started with section G. Although I'm going to say that I have this nice pretty slide here, I'm actually skipping section G. This really is mostly a lot of yes, no type questions. So as you're going through it, please answer those questions and record what the operator provides you. That is my section G presentation for you all. Once again, please make sure you guys are watching the recordings. All right, we are going to jump into field operations. So this is where things can definitely start getting a lot of data from our operator. So our goal here is we're going to make sure we are always recording our field operations correctly. And also we're going to go through a lot of pieces to show how they are connected throughout the questionnaire. I want to start by reminding everyone, CEAP is different from ARMS 2. Okay, there are things that are reported in ARMS 2 that are not reported in CEAP. So we want to make sure we are always reading our include and our exclude statements. When in doubt, when you're with the farmer, you can put it on there. However, when you get home, make sure you read everything and you can update the sequence numbers when you're home. Okay? So like I said, we're always reading that include exclude statement. Better to include more information and make those updates while you're editing your questionnaire at home. All right, the main thing when it comes to section I, if tillage is disturbing the soil, it's going to be recorded here. So just in the chat, what are some examples of soil disturbing equipment? What are examples that we would be having here? I know I have a couple right here, but what are examples of some soil disturbing equipment? A plow. Driving. Field cultivator. Disc. More about ripper. Yep. A drill. Tiller. I like that. Even driving across the field will impact it. Yep. Planter. Yes, we want to make sure we are including all of these in our section I. Very good. Thank you. All right. I'm not sure where my pictures went. Okay. I lost some of my arrows all of a sudden. However, as you can see in our include and exclude statement, it says do not include manure applications. However, right here in column 7, it does talk about manure application. So for this example, originally I was going to ask why we were going to include it, but my previous one or chart kind of went away on us here. So because it was incorporated, this is why we are including it in our section I. So if we're going all the way back to section D, as soon as we're getting that incorporation of how it's applied, we're going to our section I and we are including it in there with all the appropriate rows. If it was just broadcast without, that is where it would not be included in our section I. All right, we're going to go through a few of the relationships between section I and our other sections. Darcy.
Hi. Okay, here's where I get a little confused because we said it was put on with incorporation. That tells you right now something incorporated at the time. If you put it on without incorporation, you're going to follow it up and put a lot of times they follow afterwards the next day or something or whenever and disc or plow or vrip or whatever to put incorporate it. So it's without they follow a different time through the field. If it's with incorporation, according to my farmers in the past, that means it's done all at one time. It's not a separate trip across the field to incorporate it. So that's where I get a little confused.
If they incorporate within a few days, that's incorporation.
Oh,
It is very as far as our definition. They may not define it as that way, but most nutrient management plans, I believe, will define it as incorporated within its, I don't know, 2 or 3 days or immediately. Like they have the equipment, right, that knifes it
knife
right
it
into the
in.
ground as they go across the field.
Yeah.
So that definitely incorporated. But if they apply it and then they come through the next day and till it, or they are applying and then a few hours later somebody's following behind them tilling it in, that's incorporated. And we want to um, collect that as incorporated because it fits the nutrient management plans and the availability is different if they incorporate it even within so many hours after it's applied, so many days, than if they were just to leave it. It's also some runoff issues that they're collecting there. So
Okay.
although the farmer may not consider that incorporated, we want it incorporated if they applied it and then came back within a few days and tilled it or immediately injected it.
If
Both
they
of those.
injected it without, I mean, the machine injects it or knifes it in, does that accept, do we have to add, we don't write another one trip across the field then, do we?
No, because that would be considered the fertilizer application,
Okay,
right? Let me
okay.
think on that and I will type a chat or type in there how to handle that when it's injected versus when it's applied and then they come back with tillage.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that before we go through some of these relationships? Lynette, I see your question. We'll go over some of those pieces here in a little bit. All right, so data relationships between our field ops and other sections. All right, so going all the way back to section C, if you have your field was grazed, if that is equal to yes, we do include the start and stop dates in our field ops. So I want to be clarified, I'm not going through every single line here. I just want to show where these relationships are. So right here on our right, we're starting from section C. We filled out that grazing information. And so all of a sudden, when we're looking over here on our field ops, that needs to be included with both our start grazing and our stop grazing date. All right, in section C, the number of days of the field was grazed. If it was grazed before or after harvest, you want to make sure you're including each start and stop graze. We're also recording the time between the start and stop in section C and the corresponding days. So once again, now here it is. It's very similar to that last one, but all of a sudden we have two, or we can have two or more grazings reported. So we want to make sure each grazing is reported in our field ops table. All right. Once again, going back to section C, we have our date planted, transplanted, or established. And this is where we're going to make sure, based on our commodity and the type of crop, that all of that information is translated over to our field ops. So going right here, we have 23, our corn and our ryegrass. We're having two separate dates. You need to have your planter for your corn and then also the seeding for the ryegrass. We need to make sure we're accounting for each of our plantings on here. Another one. So we start at the very beginning. Now we're going to our harvest. Once again, we want to make sure we are including it, and also it matches the last harvest day. Okay. So going right here, we have another one. We have two harvested crops. We have winter wheat was harvested June 1st, and then we have our soybeans October 25th. We're going to have our combine for our winter wheat and to have it for our soybeans. Please note those our dates are matching between our two sections. So not just the action itself, but we need to make sure that the planting and harvesting dates also match throughout the questionnaire. All right. Oh, and then day harvested. This is something very similar, but we're talking about for alfalfa. So as you can see in our field ops, we're including each time it was baled. However, our date harvested on our section C is that last one. So that last one is going to correlate with our field ops as well. All right, we also need to make sure we're getting our cover crop recorded. So right here, that is where we have our ryegrass. We're talking about our seeding, the grazing, and also the disking of our ryegrass all in one, or all of those relationships are tying over as well. All right. All right. If you had a cover crop that is grazed, I know we kind of talked about this one already, but we're going to include it right here. And it's also going underneath the ryegrass, not the corn, our start and our stop date for that cover crop being grazed. All right, going through a few more. Our cover crop termination date and method. We need to make sure it gets translated over. So once again, we're looking at our section C, when that crop was terminated, how it was terminated. So this, if you can look, 4 is a tilde in. We need to make sure that the equipment compares and our date is the same. So once again, I know that we're getting a lot of pictures and scenarios, but the main thing is we're looking at section C and I. Every piece, we're making sure they correlate based on the type of equipment, and our dates and the crop are all compared between these two so far. All right, next we jump into section D. And we kind of already talked this one already, but if we have fertilizer and it was incorporated in the field. So I know Darcy and Angela gave us some examples here, but once again, this is where it is going to be included in our field operation table. Okay, so all of those codes that are used throughout the questionnaire are very important to make sure they are matching. All right, once again, now we're moving on to section E, where we're talking about manure. Once again, it's the very similar thing. With incorporation, it needs to be included in our field ops table. Okay, so once again, we're getting it with incorporation. We need to make sure we are including that using the right type of equipment, and our dates are the same. All right, the biggest recap. I know I just kind of clicked through a bunch of scenarios and showed some pictures, so sorry, that one was more just showing a lot of pictures there. But the big part when you're looking at your field operations is we want to ensure those data relationships are consistent throughout the questionnaire. Okay? Every section is tied to another section on how it needs to be reported. If a responder reports in section C about grazing, that needs to be included. If we're talking about anything that has some sort of tillage, we need to make sure we're including the tillage depth. If a respondent indicates in section D or E about fertilizer or manure application with incorporation, we need to ensure that that is included. If it was incorporated, and it does say within 2 days of the application. So my notes say 2 days, Darcy, is what we were told. Okay. All right. There's another question. Oop. Wait. All right. I think it might be confusing relationship if you record broadcast, if it's a few days later. So once again, if it's getting incorporated into the soil, that's where it is. It needs to get recorded. Any disturbance to the soil, we're reporting it in our field ops. And because for the example we provided there, it was for that fertilizer, that's why we said yes, it was for the purpose of the fertilizer in the soil. Oop. All right. Oh, I just went down really far. I'm so sorry. There was a question I was about to answer and then I lost it. All right, for field operations, do you list irrigation dates, pesticide application, and fertilizer applications? So I'm gonna go back to our include and our exclude statements here that I had towards the beginning of our slide. Sorry, I'm gonna go back back a lot. I apologize. So right here is the things that we're going to include and exclude. Okay, so right here where it says exclude work done by hand for machines for our fertilizer, manure, or pesticide applications. When we're talking about irrigation, it does say include if you're preparing for irrigation before seeding. Okay. Like I said, as I mentioned earlier, if you have any doubt, put it on the chart when you're with the operator. When you get home, you can take it and update your sequence numbers if possible, or if needed. Okay. We'd rather have too much information and have to erase something or strike through it than having to call that operator back and say, I also need to get a little bit more information. Okay. All right. This I get asked why I turn this into FSA. Why do you need this? Okay, so this for FSA is not going to be a good. I gave this to FSA for this one. Um, why do we get it? There was a good video about the purpose for CEAP. I highly recommend going and looking at it. I believe there was one actually that NRCS did for there. But like I said, they're really trying to get the conservation purposes for research. They're trying to figure out, and not just like that, but how can we better help the farmers too? So remember all these surveys that that we ask and we're going this in depth. It's because NRCS cannot help provide programs to help the farmers if they don't know what they're doing and what help they need. So there's your big reasons. Our surveys, we always want to tie it back to how can we benefit the farmer. You unmuted. Did you have something to add, Angela?
I would add to what you were saying. If you want to have a great sales pitch, I think this is something for any area that has a lot of CAFOs, or if you're interviewing a CAFO, they are required to have a nutrient management plan. So any operation that is required to have a nutrient management plan, this is their way of showing are those restrictions that they are bound to follow working or not? Is NRCS seeing the results that those regulations were created to provide?
The response was, I don't have to do this. All of our well, I'm going to say overall, our surveys
Outside of some,
are voluntary. Outside of census, it is all voluntary. And that's why we're taking you guys out there to help encourage them to do these surveys and also make it easier for them to do it. CEAP, they do not have an option of doing it on their own because it is that selected crop. However, we have a lot of complicated surveys, and that is why we teach you guys how to do it so you can help them. Get them to fill out these surveys, improve our responses, and get better data out there. So once again, the do I have to do it? Generally, no. For all of our surveys, the answer is no. But the purpose is the why. Why are we asking this? How can it come back to help you on your operation or operations like you? Operations that are growing, starting off, things that do need to improve their conservation practices or are unable to do some of the conservation practices because, as we had some of those of they don't know where to start or what the best practice is. This is where we're getting this information for NRCS to be able to help our farmers. Hmm. All right. All right. I'm going to jump into sections JK and conclusion. I just a few slides. Why are these not mandatory? The short story or explanation is Congress can dictate what is mandatory and not. Census is the only thing that is required by law. census and census follow-ons. All the other ones are mandatory surveys. We cannot require farmers to fill out our surveys, and we cannot make them mandatory. Deb, you're muted still.
Yeah, I'm quick like that. So I put a question in the chat. Do you want to mention the box, the 0499 at the top of those field operations pages? We're still supposed to be putting the total number of lines in on each table, correct, this year?
Yes, that is a very good comment. On the top of each chart, there is a box, and we want to include the number of lines for each chart. Thank you. Mhm. All right, jumping in to JK and our conclusion. Once again, I just have a few slides. When we're looking at section J, this all of a sudden we're taking to our entire operation. So everything up until this point, we've been asking about our selected field. And the reason we change it from selected field to our whole operation is we want to capture our acres for the entire farm and help NRCS be able to categorize the type of operation and the size of farm that these practices are happening. The only piece that I'm really going to mention on in our section K, other pieces so far are very similar to our questions. This actually is something that is also very similar that you've seen on our surveys. But I just want to emphasize, because something we've seen a lot is, well, I'm 50-50 grain and cattle, for example. I mean this nicely, make them pick one. Where do you get your most value of sales? Okay, you can circle both if they choose, but please, we need them to pick one farm code type for section K. Hmm? All right, so once again, what is this? We're gathering the demographic and information about farmers to understand the diversity management practice and also the economic sales for our operations. So very similar to what we have, we do have this information like our ARMS 3 and our census and also like area type pieces. Having it gives us a full picture of what that operation is to help us determine if there is a specific area, a specific farm type that are utilizing these practices. Maybe it's farm size to determine which ones are going in this direction and possibly which operations are going to need help with these NRCS programs. All right, I went through that fairly quickly. There wasn't a lot in those couple sections. Before I go into some more of our connections throughout the entire questionnaire, do we have any questions of something we've discussed so far? I like this. This is critical. Many operators complain that their needs are ignored in the big picture. This gives them a voice. I tell them you are the only source of this information. No one is sitting in an office and making it up. 100%. Yes. That is very true. Thank you, Julia. That is a great comment. All right, so we're going to dive into some more relationships for for CEAP. I know we've heard some of these before. I'm going to talk about some that we've heard. We might have a few that we have not seen so far, but I want to make sure we're going through and talking about some relationships again. So first, the CEAP section relationship checklist was created. I know we've had some questions about that. It is on the NASDA webpage. I have a picture of it here in a little bit, but the relationship checklist was created as a tool to help you while completing your CEAP questionnaire. Please use this as a reference, and when you're either with the farmer and also when you're done with your interview, when you're editing, go through and you can make sure that you're hitting all of those pieces. All right, we're going to start with your questionnaire itself. So we want to talk about handling our paper questionnaire. So I want to emphasize once again, we are all getting a paper labeled questionnaire for CEAP. However, if you remember from last year, it's really a bunch of numbers on our label. There cannot be any personally identifiable information anywhere on our CEAP questionnaire. Okay? All of these questionnaires, the forms are going to NRCS, which is why there cannot be any PII anywhere on this questionnaire. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through some generic. So last year, we have some examples from last year on here. When you write a name or address or phone number information on the questionnaire, a NAS staff has to go through and block all of that information from being visible to NRCS. So when you're going through, once again, we had names and information or towns on this. We need to make sure that we're blocking that out before it is getting sent, or even better, not being put on this questionnaire at all. All names need to be removed, and that even includes your guys' names as enumerators. Okay? This is a great comment for a generic reference. Talk to the operator, scheduled an interview. That is great. We want to use things he, she, operator, partner, meet at the farm, whatever it might be. We are not going to give any specific names, locations, phone numbers throughout the questionnaire. All right, we're going to go a little bit into some relationships right here. So I know we've talked about a lot, but acres and dates recorded throughout the questionnaire. We want to make sure everything ties back. Like I said, we've already discussed some of these. We're going to go over them again. All right. Remember, we're interested in a single selected field identified during the screening process. And section C is where all of these relationships are starting to happen throughout the questionnaire. Also, for section A, you recorded the selected field in our acres. And we also would have had our idle crop as well. So we want to make sure that those are correlated to our management strategies later in section C. Those will be the same acres you're also referencing in section D when you're collecting the fertilizer information. When we zoom in a little bit here, you can see column 9 collects how many acres were treated in this application. That must be equal to or less than the acres in section A. If and when we get to the manure information in section E, way over to the right side of the column, you'll see another similar question on how many acres were treated in this application. Remember, in a single application, once again, acres must be equal to or less than our total acres reported in section A. When we're getting to pesticide applications in section F, I'm sure we're starting to see a pattern here, guys. I'm repeating a lot here. Those acres are in that same relationship. How many acres? It must be equal to or less than our selected field. Date relationships. I know we talked about a lot of them earlier. You are collecting a lot of information about the selected field in our cropping history. Dates for planting, harvesting are recorded in section C, and those must match when we're getting into our section I. When you're reviewing that checklist, items like these can be caught and noted and then corrected after your interview. I know we didn't go over irrigation, guys, but irrigation in the field is first identified in section C, and then we also have it then we have it in section H, irrigation. So once again, if we're having stuff in section H for irrigation, it's tying all the way back to that section C table. Grazing. We learned that if grazing occurred before or after harvested, we're going to have our grazing dates in our field operations. Okay? So all of these things are tying back to section C throughout our entire interview. We're constantly going back to our dates and our acres that are being reported. If we look at sections relating to, or section relationships with section D, our fertilizer, this relates to sections based on how it was applied. With that incorporation, we have to have some tillage in section I in our field ops, noting the operation was used, or noting that operation was used to incorporate that fertilizer. Moving on to other section relationships in section D, commercial fertilizer application applies to sections based on how it was applied. If the fertilizer is applied by irrigation, you have two places to link this information in the fertilizer application. Cropping history should have this question answered as yes, as we did a few slides ago, and this is due that you will be completing section H on irrigation. We go into manure applications. How was it applied? Just as we discussed with if it is manure dry or liquid, the tillage application needs to correlate with that machinery or the machinery application. If the manures are applied by irrigation, just like we talked about with the fertilizer, we need to make sure it is marked yes when we're getting in our irrigation. So once again, all of these are applied throughout our questionnaire. All of the items that I just discussed are in this checklist. I know we've referenced it a bit throughout our questionnaire. These are all discussed in this checklist that is on the website. It also includes additional information, including cover crops, cropping history, fertilizer percent versus actual pounds and nutrients, and pesticide table reminders. So please always, when we're done with each interview, always refer back to this checklist to make sure our questionnaire is as complete and thorough as possible. I know I went through a lot of those really quick just because we had discussed so many of those connections already, but do we have any questions on the relationships in a question inside the questionnaire? Oh, I like this comment. That's what sticky notes are for. They can be removed before sending in. That is a good one. If you want to put a person's name on it, put it on a sticky note and just make sure it's taken off before you ship it in. Grazing fees? Question mark. I'm assuming is like, are we including or is there a question about grazing fees on here?
No, we're not collecting anything economic. So, no income, no expenses.
Okay. Thank you. So grazing fees will not be included. We just know that it was grazed on the operation. All right, guys, I was a little nervous I was going to run out of time. Maybe that's why I rushed through the last slides, but I do have a game. Oh, regarding to PII on the farms, in phase 1, I used 9 by 12 manila envelopes to contain all the papers for each operation and put the PII on the manila envelope. That is a great idea. You have one spot for all the PII, as long as we are keeping it off of that questionnaire. Yep, another good. Zeros could be sixes, sevens could be twos. Yes. Please make sure you are writing clearly. Slow down if we can. I know sometimes they talk fast, but please, as you're editing, make sure everything is clear Um, make sure everything is clear by the time that you ship it to your coach and then to the non. Someone said they were not available. You bought your own, Becky. So, I mean, use the resources that are available to you. I know yesterday we talked a lot about having a notebook to go through. Just write the POID and the on the top of the questionnaire that you can transcribe all of your notes if needed. Was the operator mailed a copy of the questionnaire? No, there was no. They don't have a copy of the questionnaire. There was no pre-survey letter for phase two. The main reason is you guys have already talked to them, and hopefully they're aware you're coming back if they were eligible. So as long as you had communicated to that of, hey, if you are eligible for phase two, we will be back. That is why that nothing was shipped out for phase two. Okay. Any other questions? Any purchases you guys would like to have, please refer back to your managers. They are the ones who approve any sort of purchases. So all of those types of questions need to go to your manager. Okay.
Linda, I like that idea. I think a postcard is something that I can consider for next year.
Perfect. You're right. It could be a different enumerator this time. Due to some of the challenges last, I know we had some phone enumerators that made you could have new records going out for phase two. Veronica, for this, they have been contacted. The only way they were sampled for phase two was an enumerator filled out phase one and the operator agreed. Why were some surveys sent to those who said no in phase one? They, if you have a specific scenario, can you please have your coach get that information? Because that is not the case for CEAP. CEAP phase two strictly went out to in the NRI tool. So in the NRI tool, it was reported that they agreed to the survey. I will say we have to make sure that that is where that NRI county and number was very important. Okay? So as long as that nut data was put on the correct or county, state, county POID, the only operators that got it were the NRI system said they agreed. So I'm seeing that we have a couple comments that they had refusals in there. And I'm going back to my original statement. In the NRI screener, that CEAP point was marked as complete. If you're having some of these concerns, please send them to your coach and we will investigate. However, the only way they were sampled was the NRI system said they were complete. Okay.
I will add, just to put everybody's mind at ease, CEAP has its own list. It does not talk to the rest of our list frame. So we had no idea that it has a history of refusing. If it was, as Debbie said, complete. So they are completely different. They do not talk to each other.
Mhm. Are they arms 3? I'm assuming could there be matches with arms 3 is where you're going with that, Becky? I will point out we
No,
actually addressed this.
yeah, I know.
Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
just asking if they're talking about the refusals previously, if they're talking about the arms,
Oh,
if they're 3 instead of seat.
oh, that's a good point. Yes, it could be mixing our surveys right here. For CEAP phase 2,
I was not.
you were not.
No,
Okay.
I specifically, there was this one person, he even went into long discussion why he was refusing, and here I get a survey for him.
then that is where I'm going to go back to the importance on phase one of ensuring that the correct information is getting put on the correct point.
Okay, and
So,
then
like I
the
said,
other
please,
thing, can I ask another question?
yes,
There
of
were
course.
there were several of them. I couldn't even get a hold of them, and I got a survey for them.
I'm gonna say, like, some of these remarks are very concerning, and it goes all the way back to that system. If we do not do the correct job, I'm not saying this to just one in person. If we as a group do not fill out phase one correctly, it impacts phase two. So the reason that operator, the ones that you're saying were inaccessible or they're heavy refusals, it's because that NRI point was marked as complete. So, and then also for contact information in CAPI, if we didn't update that information in CAPI, I'm just slight variation, the printed information in CAPI follows that information that was provided from enumerators from phase one. So everything that moved to phase two was what was completed in phase one. So if we're having issues, these are things that need to get addressed at phase one. And frankly, for when it comes to, we will have another year for CEAP. Please remember, there's a 3-year cycle for this. And these are types of things that we need to, oh, I just got an okay on that. These are types of things that we need to make sure are done correctly in phase one so we don't have this issue for phase two next year.
Okay, then my next question is when I come across these, because I know I marked the one in how should I put it, refusal, and it did what it was supposed to. The system did what it was supposed to, and yet I think somebody went back and did something to my stuff after I did that, and because there's some of them where I kept calling and kept calling, and so I would just keep, and I didn't do fill it, so it wasn't completed in
I,
phase one.
I can't speak to every individual situation. The hard thing when you're looking at the NRI points, everyone who has access to that NAS region has access to every single point
Okay,
within
but my
that
my
region.
question right now is what do I do with
Mhm.
those surveys? Can I send them back blank? Because they're not going to sit there for 2 hours if they said no.
Angela, do you have a good answer for this one on how we should handle?
I'm hearing refusal. Now, whether I will leave it up to you and the coach to decide if somebody's going to give this person a call and try and set something up, or if we are just going to accept that they have said they're going to refuse and then submit that back as a refusal. But please document that on the front cover. We
Okay.
do not understand what happened. When I was there for the screener, this is what I was told.
Mhm.
I'm completing this as a refusal and send it in.
Okay. Because I really don't want to get a hold of this guy. It'll just make him angry.
Yeah, I'm fine with maybe, well, depending on the size operator, you might be back to see him next year for another screener. So I'm fine to not bother them today and hope that we can work with them in the future.
Okay.
CEAP is in CAPI. Yes, 100%. They are now available in CAPI. I will discuss that here in a little bit. Um, David, all of your materials are either with your coach or your manager. So those materials, please reach out to them and everything will get distributed. If you have, oh, Angela already answered that. So Beverly, please go through the channels. We'll make sure that if we do have any duplicate operators, that we get those handled appropriately. All right. We have a lot of data collection types questions. I'm going to go ahead and go over these right now, just letting you know. So 82 within driving range. This is intended to be in person. So I know for phase one, we also said it was in person, and some people did do it over the phone. So if that is the case, I want to say phone is an option, but for NRCS, they would prefer it going in person because I think we've all seen that sometimes we can get a little bit cleaner, make sure that we're talking about the same field with the operator. So NRCS's preference is for these to be face to face. If you have any concerns on your time or miles, work with your coach and manager. Okay. These are more comments about refusing. Phase on phone only. I'm not for sure where that confusion is. There were some instances where, due to sampling, we didn't have an enumerator in the area, so we were encouraging the phone calls, or they got reassigned to someone to phone because there was no one in the local area. I cannot give every exact scenario, but there were some instances across the country like that. So I want to close on the phase one because it does seem like there is some frustration. We have some refusals or some inaccessibles that got put in here. The wrong data got put on the wrong point in NRI system. I really hate to say it, but if those are the cases, if you know this guy was a refusal or you know you did not talk to him, that is what happened. This is something Angela and I are going to work on for phase two, but just needs to be emphasized when we get into phase one again next year, we cannot have these types of mistakes because sadly, for each one of you who are telling me this guy was a refusal or an inaccessible, that's telling me that a guy who did respond and is willing to fill it out is not in phase two. So for all of our surveys, we need to make sure that we are following all the correct procedures, we're following all the correct steps, making sure data is getting put in the correct spot. Okay. All right. So I'm a little nervous on my time now because we did get it. I'm afraid my next piece is going to have some discussion. So even though I have my game, I'm going to skip that for now. And if we have time, we'll play a game before we're done. I want to be respectful of our time again. We ended right on time yesterday. I want to do that again. All right, so going into data collection. Data collection starts as soon as you get all of your materials. I know we had a few people saying they didn't have it from their coaches or managers. Work with them to get all of your materials. And data collection will go until April 3rd. Please make sure that you are balancing all of your workload. We are going to have a lot going on. I know yesterday we were asked why is CEAP and ARMS 3 going on at the same time. I'm going to just say our shutdown, the status of of phase one pushed us into this. So please make sure you're staying on top of all of your records for CEAP, for ARMS 3, and for any other surveys that you do have. One of the big things that got us for phase one is as a whole, as the entire country, we procrastinated phase one and then we did not get all of it in, and that's where data collection was pushed back. We are not going to get an extension. April 3rd is already our extension due to the shutdown and our extension from phase one. Please make sure you are staying on top of your workload, getting things done regularly. Especially, we do not want to get into March where we start talking about our large quarterlies and trying to get all of our CEAP and our ARMS 3 done at the same time. So we need to make sure we are consistently moving forward with our data collection. All right, this is going to look very similar to some of the slides y'all saw yesterday. So our first 3 attempts are going to be by phone. And one of the big things on this, other than those scenarios you guys gave us, we've already talked to these guys. They should be prepared for our phone calls. I already mentioned this as well. The goal is to do this face to face. So your phone calls really are to set up those appointments with the operator to do them in person. Once again, I know some people have done it over the phone. Be respectful of the operator, and our CS preference is for these all to be face to face. When we're looking at our phone calls, these cannot be 3 phone calls all in one day. We want it spread out a little bit within a couple week period. Mainly, you could have someone who's on vacation. Maybe they're just outside at the wrong time of day. Please, we don't want to extend it too far into data collection, but we really want to try and get those phone attempts made within the first couple weeks. Once again, after that, we're going to start our driving around. If you have an appointment in an area, you can go ahead and try and get more operators in that area that you haven't reached on the phone. If you have one area over here that you haven't gotten a hold of anyone, plan out your route, go and visit all of those operators. Try and get as many people as you can in that one big loop. Make sure you plan on it, those loops. After we've made some attempts, that's when we're going to try some phone calls again. Once again, after we get all those, talk to your coach and see if there's another strategy or something we can do, whether that is a different phone call or another personal attempt to try and reach that operator. I do not have the slides about our contact attempts, but once again, please make sure our contact attempts are always recorded in CAPI. This kind of is just a little bit deeper dive. I know it's not always possible, but please try and have at least 5 operators when you try and drive around. It's a lot more efficient for your time, also for the operators, or for your time to try and get as many of those operators in one. The big thing is if you have an appointment, make sure you're giving yourself enough time before the appointment that you can either complete another appointment or you should always do it after. Okay, you want to make sure you want to be respectful of everyone's times. And if you have an appointment with an operator, you are making that appointment happen. Depends on how far you're driving. Absolutely correct. That's why I said when possible. I know there's different scenarios for everyone, but we would like to try and maximize your efforts while you are driving around. The other big thing is make sure you have all of your materials with you. And that can be for the interviews you're going, also for those additional operators you're going to try and collect that day. Hmm. All right, so when we are submitting data, we've talked about this a little bit already. CAPI is used for our contact attempts. I hammered this a lot yesterday, but contact attempts are no longer an option. They are what you need to do for each of your contact attempts for your phone calls. This is going to help your coach, your manager, your AD looks at it, and I'll be honest, Angela's going to give me a call and ask why so many records have been contacted or not. So those contact attempts are showing that we are attempting these records. We're making progress. We're collecting this data. So I do not want a call from Angela asking why we're not going out and collecting data for not recording our contact attempts. All right, 100% paper. Once again, I know we've already mentioned this, and this is also similar to phase 1. Every complete, every refusal, every single inaccessible must be shipped to the nod. You need to account for the entire sample. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that. Every complete, every refusal, every inaccessible will be shipped to the nod. You do have you have a label to your coach. Your first forms should go to your coach, and then you're going to start shipping to the nod. We already went over this, but once again, there is no PII on that form. Okay. I know, sorry, Angela, I know we've had some frustrations with NAS in the recent months, but they are very short-staffed. We want to be respectful of their time as well. So please, the cleaner we can make it when we ship that data in, the more time that it's going to save on the NAS side, and the cleaner it's going to be when it gets to NRCS. All right, um, for the materials that you're going to be getting from your coach and your manager, you're going to get some shipping materials, some supplements. We talked about that one for if you need additional pages. And you're also going to get your questionnaires. I have labels on here. Something that was a little different for phase 2 than we've ever done before is in order to get these materials out quickly, rather than getting the questionnaires full printed and labeled at NAS gave us the questionnaires and then they gave us a set of labels to distribute. I will be honest, doing that saved us a minimum of 2 weeks. I'm going to say it probably saved us more time than that, but a minimum of 2 weeks on getting this data out to you. So I do have this in here as labels. Whether your coaches will label them before they give it to you or you need to label it yourself, I'm not sure. But please work with your coaches and your managers on getting these materials. All right, our code for today is project code 912, and that is what you're going to be using for all of your CEAP work. Earlier when I mentioned driving around, I know we talked about yesterday with ARMS 3, is you could visit an operator for ARMS 3 and then visit an operator for CEAP in the same day. Please make sure you're recording those times separately. We want to show our true time on how much it's taking on our ARMS 3, how much it is taking on our CEAP survey. I feel like I talked really fast there and I apologize. I do see that there are some comments in the chat. So we're not getting the same materials we used to. You are right. The materials that are being provided are a lot slimmer than they had been in the past. Depending on what region you are on, it is drastically different. And even region from region, like I said, we were all different. There are some areas that I hope that we improve and get some more materials and paper supplies. And there are others that I can tell you will not change. And it's a new environment and we're going to have to work to adapt to these changes. Fortunately, CEAP is one that you do get paper. I know that is something we enjoy. We're getting a little spoiled right now. But please do your best. If there are things that you need, work with your coach, work with your manager. But I want to be specific. We had a lot of wants, and I know that I also spoiled my enumerators with some of the wants as well. But that is also where it goes of what are things that we are required to do our job and what are things that are helpful. Some of those training materials that we used to get from the RFOs, I'm hoping we can do a better job and provide those type of training materials again in the future. We went for a very big loop when when NAS lost a lot of folks last year. So that is where a lot of those pieces have changed. And I would like us to get to a better place on those. When it comes to paper materials, like I said, I do not foresee us going back to the structure we were before. There are some areas we're definitely not done with our adjustments in this new transition, but we want to make sure that we are providing you what you need to get this job completed. What was the time burden? Angela let us know it's 74 minutes is the approximate time to do the interview. I want to point out that is the time for the interview itself. So it's very similar to like ARMS 3 when we ask beginning and ending time. It's for that interview process as a whole. So that is how long, if you would sit down and do the farmer with the interview, that is the average time. Um, there was a remark that it took more than 3 hours. It depends on the operation. Please remember that. And that's not just for CEAP phase 2. That's for every single survey. Yesterday, I made a comment of congratulations, if you have a CRP, it's going to take you less than 15 minutes. So you have to remember that the average time is not saying every interview is going to take 74 minutes, it's saying that's the average time. If you have an operator with phenomenal records, and honestly, sometimes the big guys are even better at this, they have great records, you're going to get through that interview faster than if you're not having the records in front of you. So being prepared, having the materials in front of you, telling the farmer if you have these records with you, we can get through it faster. Those types of pieces will make that interview process go a lot quicker for you and help the operator with their time. And let's be honest, sometimes your farmer is just chatty too. So staying on topic can also help depending on what your interview is. Um, Nothing is getting entered into CAPI other than your contact attempts. All the questionnaire information is all in the questionnaire. What does the NOD stand for? It is the National Operation Division in St. Louis. So they're the ones that are going to process all the questionnaires, all the scanning of the questionnaires and materials. All right, if we have a CEAP in ARMS 3, what is the priority? All right, I'm going to be honest. RFOs used to take at them, and depending on maybe the type of operation, where it was located, all these different factors, we would pick. Because we are not having that RFO, and frankly, I am not going to say always fill out ARMS 3, always fill out CEAP. Ideally, the operator will fill out both. I'm well aware of what I just said. That may not be common. You might get a unicorn that will do both. However, for this instance, ask the operator which one they would prefer. Like I said, ideally both. I would put that choice on the operator to see what they're willing to provide. All right. I know we're getting business cards in there. We talked about that a little bit yesterday as well. I'm going to start with, I apologize. You're right. You absolutely do need these. I mentioned yesterday, I think we are at the place where we are going to be able to distribute them. How quickly they go out, I cannot guarantee it, but ADs will be starting to have that communication with managers and coaches here soon. The slides, yes, we will be able, I can provide the slides for both of the days and also the recordings as soon as they're both available. I like that. When an operator asks me how long it'll take, as long as it takes for me to read you the questions and for you to answer. That is true. All right. Is there any other questions? I'm assuming you're saying if you can get your own business cards. I'm going to ask you to hold off on it just because we want to make sure that it has the correct information, logo, provided on there. So like I said, ADs should be working with managers here soon to provide that information. Deb?
I wasn't sure how to type this out. So we're not using the NRI screener app thing at all. But there
Correct.
was something said. So when we were doing calls for phase one, when we were doing them way out of our area and stuff, they said, don't get so picky on the lines. We can fix that during phase two. So let's take these inaccessibles. So if people did get some inaccessibles back that were inaccessible in phase one, and for some reason they got them back, how do we go about they wouldn't have the field then? So you know what you see where I'm going with this? Like how do we
Yes.
those lines if they were off or do a field that wasn't done in phase one?
What I would say is oh, Angela pointed right away. So, oh, you're making me take it. Oh, you're making me take it. All right. So, if you ever have that instance where you had an inaccessible for phase one, and hopefully we're willing to take it for phase two, those notes all need to be made on that questionnaire. These are the acres, similar to like the refusal of we're not attempting because they were very aggressive for phase one. These are the appropriate acres. This is what it is. I am going to say this. Phase one has been locked. One issue that we had this year for phase one is Enumerator started entering phase one data in last year's screener. So to avoid any sort of issues, phase one has been locked down. So if you have any changes to acres, if you have any updates to the field, whatever it might be, having a comment on there is going to help NRCS understand where those changes are.
So although it is locked, you can still go in and look at the map. So that's still an option, but you won't be able, it'll be like a preview.
Perfect. Thank you. Darcy?
Okay, so we can see the map. That was my concern because some of these I have not had. So as long as I can see the map, I don't need to touch anything. As long as I can see it, and we can see it,
Yes, you will be
You'll
able
be
to
able to
see.
see
we
it.
can check it out and look at it and then turn it in. Okay, thank you. That's what I needed.
Good point, because I
And
have a
if there
lot
is
of.
a gross error, work with your coach. We'll open it up on a case by case basis.
I want to point
So,
out a gross error is not I didn't do it very clean because I did some, and may I tell you, I understand the struggle of making a perfect line. A gross error is like I put 5 acres and it's really 5 or 50 plus acres. So those are where we're looking at some major changes on there. Go ahead, Darcy.
okay, so we didn't have to put acres in before. We just had to draw the
Yep.
map. But okay,
Correct,
so
but it calculated it based on that map.
okay, but if we check it out, we'll be able to check it out, look at the picture to show the operator, and then
Mm-hmm.
turn it back in.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. That's what I was really worried about all of a sudden when you said they're locked. I'm like, uh-oh.
No, just no changes on them at this time.
So
Okay,
do the acres come pre-populated in the survey? I don't have my assignments yet. So like
They
the
will
ones
not.
we
Oh,
didn't do, that we're getting that.
no. I think the big thing is if you're looking at the map, if you go out and take a look at it and you're looking at a very small area compared to a large one, that is where you're going to see those big differences. So it's going to be a visual for you on those pieces. All right. So, sorry, we are jumping to ARMS 3. I want to emphasize they said the due date in CAPI is different. It is due on April 17th. I got that confirmation from NAS. I'm not sure on the date that's in there. I did ask them to make sure that was updated, and I will verify it again. How do you know what map to look at if you don't have the paperwork from phase one? It is going to be the same way you saw on the other ones. The phase two label will have the NRI point information. So in order to look at anything in the NRI screener, you need the state, you need the county, the op county, let me clarify, the operator county, and you're going to need the NRI point. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. I have a game. We have 15 minutes. Do we want to play a game? Or are you guys all like seeped out? Like you, oh, I'm getting people to shake their head no. Okay. That's so, oh, and then I'm getting some people saying yes. How about this? I will go to it. This is not required. We have 15 minutes left. If you would like to hang out and play a game, I'll stop the recording and say we are good. What I'm going to do before you leave, though, let me get this moved over here. I do have an evaluation to put in the chat. So if we have any additional questions, or if you'd like to hang out and play the game, you're welcome to stay. On that, I am going to stop the recording before because it's just a fun game.